We begin in a cinema, where it has happened a few times that a boy enters without paying. Carl asks Hank if he has ever seen the boy's family. Then he tells Carl to just let it go. Meanwhile, Hank's daughter Ronnie is watching Maddie, who is hiding, and decides not to say anything like her father. She has a more understanding heart. Carl keeps insisting, saying that pity won't pay the theater's light bill. Hank, not wanting to start a fight, asks Ronnie if she saw the boy in the theater. The little girl says yes. For a moment, Maddie thinks she is going to turn him in. But instead, Ronnie tells Carl to look somewhere else. When Hank and his daughter leave, Maddie takes the chance and comes out of hiding, but Carl sees him. The boy runs out, and Carl shouts after him, threatening to call the police next time. Sometime later, we see Maddie walking through the lonely snow-covered streets of Derry with the pacifier still in his mouth. He stretches out his thumb, trying to hitch a ride with the few cars that pass by, but they ignore him. Finally, a car stops. Inside, there is a couple with their children. The driver lowers the window and asks if he is all right. The woman, clearly moved by what she sees, tells him to get in before he freezes and offers him a blanket to keep him warm. The man asks Maddie where his parents are and for an address to take him home, but the boy, with a distant look, says he doesn't care where they take him, as long as it isn't back to Derry. The woman says they are heading to Portland, and without asking any more questions, Maddie accepts the ride in silence. As they drive, the couple turns on the radio, and the news reports about new underground nuclear tests in Moscow, warning that radiation could pose a global threat. The children ask to hear something else, so the woman changes the station. But as the channel changes, the horror doesn't change. Little by little, Maddie begins to sense that something isn't right with this family. Arlene, the eldest daughter, starts sniffing the red liquid of the liver she is holding in her hands, and with a look of pure terror, she holds it up to Maddie, trying to make him smell it too. Suddenly, without warning, everyone in the car starts to laugh. It's a tense laugh, as if something in their minds has broken. It's not a normal laugh. The laughter fills the car, echoing in Maddie's ears, and in anguish, he realizes he is trapped with abnormal people. Maddie looks out the window and sees a sign pointing back to Derry. Confused, he tells them he thought they were going to Portland. He begs them to stop, but the driver just turns up the radio's volume, completely ignoring him. The boy's fear begins to grow. When he spots a gas station, he asks them to stop because he needs to use the bathroom, but no one responds. The youngest boy continues spelling random, nonsensical words, and before long, the others begin doing the same, repeating the letters together like a distorted chant. Desperate, Maddie tries to open the door, but it's locked. Then he tries to grab the steering wheel, and in the struggle, accidentally hits the woman in the stomach. Suddenly, she starts to scream. She is having contractions. The birth begins right there in the car. While her children and partner continue singing endlessly, the baby is born, but it is not a human baby. To the joy and delight of the family and the total horror of Maddie, the creature that emerges is monstrous and wild, a nightmare made flesh. The mother, laughing hysterically, holds it by the umbilical cord, making the thing scream and splash blood all over the interior of the car. As the rest of the family watches the scene with macabre pleasure, frozen in terror, Maddie puts the pacifier in his mouth. The woman's children watch him with those crooked, deformed eyes. In an instant, the creature lunges at him. Only the child's pacifier flies away, falling into the water as the family's laughter mingles with the howling wind. 4 months later, in April of '62, we meet a young aviation-obsessed boy named Phil, who before heading to school, watches the plane slicing through the sky above the town of Derry. Meanwhile, at a nearby airbase, Major Leroy Hanlon and Captain Russo are preparing to take on new responsibilities. Hanlon is very excited about his move to Derry. Unlike his partner who clearly isn't comfortable with the situation, honestly, this is not the mission Russo would have chosen for himself. Nonetheless, Hanlon maintains his optimistic attitude, a mindset that seems to understand the strains between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Colonel Fuller personally welcomes them. During the conversation, he explains how Major Hanlon's skills and experiences will be of great help in Derry. He reminds them that although the base seems to be in the middle of nowhere, it is actually one of the 6 most strategic installations in the country. He tells them in a serious tone that, as the northernmost base in the United States, they are on the front line. Soviet airspace is about 7 hours of flight beyond the Arctic Ocean. If any nuclear threat ever occurs, they will be the first to get the call. As they tour the installations, Captain Russo spots a restricted area marked as Special Projects. Noticing Russo's curiosity, Colonel Fuller subtly changes the subject and turns to Hanlon, asking if he plans to live on base. The Major replies, no. He prefers to rent a house in town, where he wants to spend his downtime with his family that will be coming to the place. The Colonel nods with a polite smile and concludes the conversation. At dairy school, Lily opens her locker, and upon doing so, a jar of pickles falls to the floor and breaks at her feet. The scene makes her blush with embarrassment as several students watch and discreetly laugh. Her friend Marge quickly approaches, looking concerned to make sure she is okay. Lily forces a smile and says she's fine, but jokingly adds that she'll probably smell like pickles until dinner. Marge, a bit nervous, admits she feels insecure about her new glasses, convinced they are too big. Lily reassures her they look good on her. But her friend isn't sure, fearing she won't be noticed by Joey. Meanwhile, Phil is talking with his friend Teddy. Phil is totally fascinated by the atomic age and conspiracy theories about aliens. He is convinced that Martians are secretly hiding in Derry, maybe even inside the airbase. Maybe they have one frozen inside and are experimenting on it, he says seriously. Teddy asks if he at least studied for the test, but Phil responds with disgust that he doesn't need to, since World War III is about to start. Back at the airbase, there is tension in the air. One of the pilots openly expresses his racial resentment towards Major Hanlon. He thinks he is too valuable to follow the rules or show respect to a superior officer of color. The atmosphere grows heavy until General Shaw walks in, and his presence commands respect. With a firm voice, he reprimands Masters for his insolence and lack of discipline. In this base, he declares, ranking and respect are mandatory. Masters, clearly humiliated, finally straightens up and salutes Major Hanlon. Later, we see Phil spying on his neighbor who is undressing, but Teddy is not paying attention. Realizing his friend is not doing what he is doing, Phil asks what he is up to. Teddy replies, he's doing his homework. Phil, still talking about other things, notices Teddy seems distracted and asks what's going on. Teddy confesses that today makes 4 months since Maddie disappeared, but Phil, indifferently, just says that's terrible and quickly changes the subject. Teddy, frustrated, insists they talk about Maddie, to which Phil responds skeptically that talking about him won't bring him back. Teddy insists, reminding him that they never found his body and still holds hope that he is alive. Phil, not understanding, responds that he doesn't know why his friend would have run away. For him, it doesn't make sense. But Teddy reminds him that Maddie didn't have many friends, and the few he had charged to go to his birthday party. Phil, trying to defend his point, responds that forgetting Maddie's birthday didn't cause his disappearance, and as far as he's concerned, Maddie is dead. Those words really irritate Teddy, and enraged, he decides to leave Phil's house. On the other side, we see Lily, who is in her bathroom, distractedly playing with her bracelet. With tears in her eyes, she remembers Maddie. She recalls the time he took her to the Lookout, a place that had been closed for years, but somehow they managed to visit it together. Maddie told her how Phil and Teddy tried to get in one day, but found out the guard didn't lock it anymore, so they made it their secret hideout. Lily was amazed by the stunning view from up there, and Maddie asked her not to tell Phil or Teddy that he took her to the Lookout. She asked him if he thought she was crazy for going, and Maddie replied that to him, she was not. At that moment, Maddie looks at her and asks what happened that day with her dad. Lily begins to tell him with a touch of sadness that she and her mom went to pick up her dad, who worked at a packaging factory where they made pickles and other similar products. When they left the factory, they realized she had forgotten something inside. A mood ring, a cheap toy she had just bought. Even though it was just a trivial thing, he went back to get it. And by doing so, he got caught in one of the machines, one that was not part of his workstation. The accident was fatal, and over time, the rumor spread that her dad's remains ended up mixed with the pickle jars. Maddie, with a soft voice, comforts her, saying she shouldn't feel guilty. It was just an accident. At that moment, fireworks explode in the sky, and they stand there in silence, lost in their own thoughts. He wishes her a happy new year, and she thanks him for letting her talk about what happened, as no one else does, not even her friends. On impulse, Maddie tries to kiss her, but Lily quickly backs away. Embarrassed, he admits that what he just did was a mistake. She firmly reminds him that they are just friends. Maddie, with a sad expression, says goodbye, mentioning that his dad shouldn't find out he's out so late. Even though Lily asks him to stop, he keeps walking. Back in the present, Lily continues to look at the bracelet with nostalgia when she is interrupted by her mother, who reminds her not to forget to prepare her clothes for the next day since they will be going to the cemetery to visit her dad's grave. Lily, with a determined tone, replies that she is not going. Her mother, insistent, reminds her that it has been a whole year since they visited the grave. Lily lets her mom know that she simply isn't ready to do that yet. Her mother, with a mix of understanding and firmness, says she is not the only one who has gone through something so painful, and the sooner she faces it, the better it will be for her. Suddenly, Lily hears a voice coming from the bathroom drain. She thinks it's Maddie, and filled with despair, asks where he is. She cries as she begs for him to come home, but all she hears is a voice saying, "He won't leave." Then, bloody fingers begin to emerge from the drain, and Lily screams, overtaken by panic. The next day at school, she tells Marge what happened. She says Maddie spoke to her through the bathroom drain. Marge, confused, can't understand why Maddie would try to contact Lily from the other side when they barely talked when he was alive. Worried about what others might think, Marge takes Lily to the bathroom to make sure their friends don't hear the story, thinking it could sound crazy. Lily, standing her ground, insists that what she heard is real and that she isn't making anything up. Marge, trying to be the voice of reason, reminds her that there are only 2 months left until summer, and that they need to get through this without people starting to spread gossip about Lily. But Lily, now irritated, asks if she cares more about what others think, or about what Patty and her friends would think of Marge. Because of this, Marge, feeling attacked, plays the victim and tells Lily she is just trying to be her friend. But sometimes it's really hard. On the other side, we see Phil and Teddy riding their bikes. Phil keeps bombarding Teddy with his theories about aliens. Lily is waiting for them in her secret hideout. When they arrive, they ask what she is doing there. Lily tells them she needs to talk to them about something important. At first, Phil, always paranoid, thinks she is going to tell about the supposed remains of her father. Teddy responds that that's not true. It never happened. Phil mentions that Maddie told him not to tell anything about the hideout and only took him there once. Lily, shocked, thinks they were good friends. But Phil tells her the situation is more complicated than it seems. So, Lily tells them what happened in the bathroom. Teddy, serious now, asks if she is absolutely sure it was Maddie who spoke to her. Lily, confidently, insists it was his voice and hopes they believe her. However, Phil, always skeptical, doesn't seem ready to accept that. Teddy, more diplomatic about it, says it may be improbable, but is not completely dismissing it. Phil still doesn't believe the story. But then, Teddy raises a question that makes him think. If Phil believes in all those fictitious stories, how can he not believe that Maddie might want to contact someone he knows? Lily, with hope in her eyes, asks if they believe her now, but Teddy, cautiously, says he is trying, but in this case, he just doesn't have that much certainty. Feeling disappointed, Lily leaves, feeling she is not being understood. Back at the airbase, Shaw tells Hanlon that the soldier who disrespected him yesterday has been punished, and that the incident will be recorded in his file. Shaw makes it clear he will not tolerate that kind of behavior on his base. Next, we find out Hanlon is a top-notch pilot, but his career took a hit after he was injured on a mission where he was the only one who came out alive. Despite that, he was assigned to this base to test a new plane. On the other hand, we see Teddy having dinner with his family, who belong to a very strict Jewish community. Teddy's father watches him, distracted and worried, asks if something is bothering him. Teddy, with a nervous tone, asks if his father thinks it's possible for someone to kidnap a child and keep them in the sewers for months. But his father, a man who really doesn't like to have that kind of conversation at the dinner table, responds that as Jews, they know all too well the horrors of the world. He says that reality itself is terrifying, steering away from Teddy's question and suggesting he stop reading so much fantasy. Later, before going to bed, Teddy is reading his comics when suddenly the lamp goes out. He turns it back on, but it turns off again. He tries again, but once more, it's dark. When he tries to turn it on for the third time, Teddy notices a grotesque face reflected in the lamp's shade. This strange event takes him back to his father's dark comments about how during World War II, Nazis tragically used the skin of Jewish prisoners to make lamps. Teddy, terrified, watches as the lamp begins to move, and he starts screaming in pure terror. His brother enters the room to see what is happening, but he sees nothing extraordinary. The next day, Teddy meets with Phil and Lily in their secret hideout and tells them what happened. Phil, a little worried, realizes he is. Next, Teddy suggests they tell someone, but Phil rejects it, saying no one will believe them, not even their parents. They would probably end up in an asylum. After discussing, the three agree to keep secret what is happening until they find out what really happened to Maddie. Together, sharing their fears and the lack of support from an adult, the three go to the library to investigate on their own. There, they find a newspaper article about Maddie's disappearance, which was classified and removed from the public record. The article states that initially, authorities thought Maddie had run away, but after not finding any trace of him, the theory changed to possible homicide. There were suspicions that a homeless man could be involved, but they never found anyone connected to the case. The report also mentions that Maddie was last seen on January 4th at the cinema, according to the testimony of one of the employees' daughters there. Intrigued, the three decide to talk to Ronnie, the girl who saw Maddie last, but she greets them with evident displeasure and demands they leave. She tells them that the police have already been to her house several times to interrogate her father, who ended up being the prime suspect in Maddie's disappearance. As the group begins to leave, Phil comments that getting involved in all this because of a song Lily heard in the sewers was a bad idea. Hearing these words, Ronnie tells them to stop. Lily seizes the opportunity to tell that a few nights ago, she heard Maddie's voice singing through the pipes in her bathtub. Ronnie, visibly shaken, confesses that she also heard something similar. She isn't sure if it was Maddie, but she heard voices, laughter, and children's screams coming from the theater's basement, leaking through the metal ducts. She even heard her own name. This shared experience creates an immediate bond between them. Later that night at the airbase, Hanlon is attacked in his sleep by unknown assailants wearing gas masks who demand to know the specifications of a military aerospace project. He refuses to reveal them, and the invaders beat him even more. The enemies point a gun at Hanlon and warn that this isn't a game. One of them will count to 3 before shooting. Hanlon tells one of them that they will have to pull the trigger. Just as he feels that his final moments are approaching, Russo knocks on the door, and Hanlon seizes the opportunity to fight back. Russo opens the door and jumps into the fight to help his friend, confronting the masked men. However, the fight ends, and the enemies leave shortly after Russo asks Hanlon who those men were, but the man has no idea. Meanwhile, Phil, Teddy, Lily, Susie, and Ronnie go to the theater because the song Maddie used to sing was well known, and Ronnie says there is probably another copy in the basement. Phil, a bit skeptical, asks why they would want to watch that stupid thing. But Teddy responds that maybe Maddie was trying to tell them something. The group enters the theater, which is empty and dark. From afar, Ronnie warns them that the movie is about to start. As they settle in, Teddy begins to cry, trying to hide it. Lily, concerned, asks if he is okay. He says yes, but admits he can't stop thinking about what happened to Maddie, wondering what he could have done to prevent it. He is consumed by guilt, a feeling that also consumes Lily. She acknowledges that Maddie needed her, but instead of being there for him, she pushed him away. Now he is gone, and the guilt eats at her. But it's not just Lily feeling this way. Teddy also admits it, and he says that what they did was even worse. He mentions that maybe if they had gone to Maddie's birthday as promised, things could have been different. But Phil tells them that it's nobody's fault, although he also starts to cry, sharing the pain with his friends. Finally, the movie starts. The familiar melody of the song Lily and Ronnie heard earlier fills the place. At first glance, everything seems to be going well until suddenly, Maddie appears on the screen right there in the movie, carrying a baby. And that baby, without a doubt, is the creature that took him. But the shock doesn't stop there. The family that picked Maddie up on the tracks also appears in the scene. The scene leaves everyone completely stunned, engulfed in utter disbelief. Seeing Maddie in a movie is something they could never imagine, and the madness of the situation completely consumes them. But the worst part is that Maddie isn't happy to see them. They can't believe what they are seeing. Maddie is in a movie, and they become even more disturbed when they realize that he can see them too. They start talking to him, and as they do, Maddie slowly moves closer to the screen. The background gradually darkens, creating a sinister and unsettling atmosphere. Then Maddie asks if they are Lily, Teddy, and Phil. They confirm and tell him to come closer, but Maddie tells them he is there because of them, because they lied to him and weren't there when he needed them the most. At that moment, the baby he is holding starts to cry. Maddie looks down, and when he lifts his gaze again, His face is distorted into a grotesque smile, an expression of pure terror that runs through everyone in the room. Without warning, Maddie launches the creature toward the screen, and it crosses the image, now twice its size. The terrifying creature begins to fly, sending a wave of panic through the room. Phil, in his thoughts about conspiracy theories and aliens, wonders what kind of mutant abomination that is, suggesting it might have been created on the military base. The horrifying creature hovers in front of him, and Lily, who is paralyzed with fear, hides. The creature attacks Phil in a horrific and distorted way, and does the same to Teddy. Ronnie, who is in the projection room, tries to escape, but the door slams shut, trapping her inside. Lily, desperate, tries to save Susie, but the creature attacks her too. Somehow, Ronnie manages to escape. She runs toward Lily, and together they manage to get out, but not before Ronnie makes sure to lock the door behind them, trapping the creature inside. Lily is still in shock, horrified by everything she just witnessed. Things become even more disturbing when she realizes she is still holding Susie's arm, completely paralyzed. Days later, fear continues to haunt the unfortunate Lily, even during her dreams. Sleeping has never been as terrifying as it was after that night at the cinema. Meanwhile, two police officers inside the patrol car closely observe Hank Grogan's apartment, believing he may be connected to the children's disappearance. From their car, both officers speculate on what Hank could have done and cannot help lamenting the suffering the victim's parents must be facing. Inside the house, Hank's mother discreetly looks out the window and tells her son that the police are still around. Hank, with a mix of resignation and exhaustion, confirms that yes, they will stay there until they find the children or find a way to blame him. She reiterates that she has told them several times that he was not near the cinema when the tragedy occurred, as that night Hank was in bed watching TV with her. Even so, Hank knows that the police do not consider this an acceptable alibi. Silently, Ronnie listens to every word of the conversation. For her, it's all unbearable overcoming that nightmare at the cinema, and, on top of that, enduring the false accusation against her father for something he didn't do. Hank's mother continues with her comments, saying that Ronnie should never have let those children into the cinema. Hank, in a calm tone, reminds her that his daughter is not responsible for what happened. His mother then changes the subject and says he needs to send Ronnie to school next week. She hates seeing her so isolated and emphasizes that she needs to study if she ever wants to leave this place. However, Hank refuses. He asserts that he will not take his eyes off his daughter, for in that place, children can get lost or simply disappear. His mother sighs and says he won't be able to protect Ronnie forever. And Hank, realizing that his daughter heard the entire conversation, tells her to leave the room. Ronnie, with tear-filled eyes, asks if they will blame him for what happened, and if they will arrest him. He tries to calm her down, and gently says no. It was just an adult conversation. Meanwhile, we see Hanlon sitting on his porch, when a car full of luggage stops in front of the house. Finally, his wife Charlotte and son Will have arrived. The boy, full of joy, runs to his father and hugs him tightly before running upstairs to explore his new room. Hanlon greets Charlotte with a warm smile. Between them, there is a strong, affectionate relationship. However, she notices something strange and, with a touch of concern, asks what happened to his arm. And Hanlon replies that he just had a little accident at the base, that he was slightly hit, downplaying the situation. Then, to change the subject, he asks what she thinks of the new house. Charlotte says it looks spacious and nice, and notes how the neighborhood seems tranquil. Meanwhile, Will, in his room, cannot hide his excitement upon seeing his new telescope. He tells his father it is exactly what he always wanted. Hanlon smiles and explains that when necessary, officers like him also use the planets to navigate at the base. They have a special device for that, in case the main system fails. Then, in a playful tone, he suggests they could use the telescope to spy on the neighbors, but Will, very seriously, replies that they shouldn't. Later, Hanlon reviews the photographs of the masks worn by his assailants during the incident at the base. His concentration is interrupted by Charlotte, his wife, who continues organizing the moving boxes. He thanks her for suggesting he get a telescope for Will, acknowledging, without explicitly saying so, that between father and son, there still isn't a very close relationship, and Charlotte, with a mischievous smile, responds that the last thing Will needed was a baseball. Hanlon laughs and comments that at his age, he would have offered a kidney for a good glove, but Charlotte gently reminds him that Will is not like him, that his son perceives the world differently. At dairy school, a sign at the entrance warns of a curfew. All children must return home before dark. It's no surprise that the entire town is on high alert after the massacre at the cinema. Marge tries, as always, to present herself as attractively as possible to gain the approval of the popular girls. However, her efforts are barely noticed. The others mock the boy whom one of them likes, even though her friend promised not to do that. Marge, trying to fit in, joins the laughter, though her forced laugh reveals her discomfort. Then she imitates the boy in an attempt to be funny, but the gesture comes out awkward, and the others call her out, saying she shouldn't be cruel. Ronnie returns to school for the first time since the tragedy, and everyone watches her cautiously, whispering nasty comments about her father. They wonder how he can sleep knowing what he did or where he hides the bodies. But before the murmuring becomes unbearable, Lily confidently approaches her. She says she was worried about her situation. In class, Marge leans over to Lily and asks if she is okay after what happened in the cinema. Lily replies calmly, although her expression remains serious and distant. Marge, somewhat uncomfortable, comments that she feels Lily has been avoiding her company. Lily sighs and explains that everything has been very difficult, that she is still struggling to understand what happened. Her friend tries to seem understanding, but cannot help mentioning that she saw her talking to Ronnie. She warns her that if Patty and the other girls in the group see them talking to the daughter of the man responsible for the tragedy, they might cut ties with her. As Marge cares a great deal about her reputation and the opinion of that superficial group, she suggests to Lily that she should have lunch with them, assuring her that she can help her integrate better. Lily looks at her disappointedly and, with a firm voice, puts her in her place. She reminds her that Teddy, Phil, and Phil's sister are dead, and that after what happened, the last thing she cares about is gaining the approval of such a stupid group. Shortly after, the classroom door opens and Will enters visibly nervous. The teacher reprimands him for being late, and the boy hastens to find a seat. However, one of his classmates makes a joke and pulls the chair just as he is about to sit, causing him to fall to the floor. Embarrassed, Will gathers his things without saying a word. In the midst of the commotion, one boy in particular, instead of mocking him, compliments his pencil. Later at the military base, Hanlon attends a meeting. Before entering, he notices the disdainful looks from some officers. Inside the room, Colonel Fuller greets him seriously and informs him that his accommodations have been searched. They found the weapon used in the attack inside the accommodations, and Masters, one of the assailants, confessed his guilt during the interrogation. Fuller dryly clarifies that he is not a Soviet spy, just a stupid racist who wanted to intimidate him. He then adds that this isn't the South, and that under no circumstances will they allow that kind of behavior. He asserts that they are investigating the other two involved, and assures Hanlon that Masters will eventually talk, promising that justice will be done. Hanlon does not respond, although skepticism appears in his eyes. Before leaving, he turns to Fuller and calmly reminds him that the weapon used was of Soviet manufacture. Meanwhile, Charlotte is downtown. She gets out of the car and curiously observes the details around her. She stops to buy flowers, and as she leaves, she notices a group of people protesting against the construction of the Paul Bunyan statue, and she is intrigued, but she proceeds to the butcher shop, where a woman from town angrily declares that she will not tolerate that kind of statue. The butcher asks her what she would like and if she is just passing through. She smiles and explains that she recently moved to the neighborhood, although she suspects she is not going unnoticed because of the color of her skin. The butcher, somewhat embarrassed, replies that he didn't mean it negatively, saying that in that town they usually see the same faces. He then introduces himself as Stan Kirsch. As they chat, Charlotte notices something happening across the street. A group of boys brutally bullies another, pushing and hitting him, and no one does anything. People continue on their way without even noticing. Troubled, Charlotte asks Stanley why no one intervenes. He mumbles that that's how kids behave, but Charlotte cannot accept that answer. Without hesitation, she crosses the street and confronts the bullies. The boy manages to escape, but the others chase after him. Charlotte stands in the middle of the sidewalk, watched by the local population with a mixture of surprise and disapproval. In Derry, apparently, no one gets involved in that kind of situation. That night, at dinner, Charlotte is still disturbed by what she witnessed. She finds it unacceptable that no one did anything to stop those bullies. With evident indignation, she tells her husband, "It was pathetic that everyone stared at her as if she were crazy while she tried to intervene." She even expresses she is willing to meet the parents of the children to voice her opinion, but Will interrupts her, asking her to calm down. Charlotte looks at him and, in a softer tone, asks if something similar has ever happened to him at school. He looks down and lies, claiming no. Hanlon, with a fatigued expression, intervenes and suggests to Charlotte that she forget the incident and that, in fact, the best thing is not to get involved in these situations. Will seizes the opportunity to ask if he can leave the table, but his mother stops him. She wishes him to tell how his school experience was. The boy, uncomfortable, answers that everything went well and, with some anxiety, asks again to leave. Hanlon nods, allowing him to go, and Charlotte sighs and tells her husband that all she wants is a little family time. She notices that Hanlon is distant, somewhat worried, but he apologizes, claiming it was a long day, and she asks if he wants to discuss what is bothering him. Although she knows it is futile, Hanlon gently reminds her that he cannot talk about his work, mentioning it being classified. Meanwhile, Ronnie is lying in her bed listening to the heated discussion between her father and grandmother. She remains still, looking at a picture of her mother. Tired of the noise, she covers her head with the blanket, trying to block out the sounds. At that moment, she feels something strange. The mattress begins to pulse slowly, as if it had its own heartbeat. The pulse intensifies, and the blanket, which was previously white, takes on a deep red hue, similar to raw flesh, and begins to fill with water. Ronnie tries to escape, struggling desperately, but finds no way out. Finally, she breaks free and falls to the floor, gasping. Looking at the bed, she realizes she is not alone. Among the soaked sheets is Jazia, her dead mother, dressed as a bride. Her face bore a twisted expression, and in a whisper full of fury, she says that the daughter destroyed her, that she came out from within her and completely tore her apart. She murmurs that all she wanted was to have her in her arms and carry her own baby. The words became darker, laced with poison, as she accused her of having killed her, just as she did with those children in the cinema, and that the same fate awaited the father. They will get him and kill him. Her laughter turns into a terrifying scream. Her face distorts, taking on a monstrous expression, as an umbilical cord emerges from the bed and wraps around Ronnie's body, dragging her into an abyss resembling a uterus filled with teeth. Inside, two bright yellow eyes watch her from the darkness. Ronnie screams and manages to escape, but her mother slowly rises, dragging her feet towards her. Terror paralyzed her until her scream manages to break through the walls. Her father bursts into the room, and the moment he enters, the vision disappears. Ronnie throws herself into his arms, trembling, terrified by what she just witnessed. In a bar in the town, 3 black military officers discuss their recent police interrogation. One of them is Dick Halloran. He wasn't interrogated, but avoids providing details about his mission. Suddenly, the police chief, a white man named Clint, enters and sits at the bar. The senator and his aide approach the counter. Then they ask why Hank hasn't been arrested yet. Clint replies that there's no evidence. The senator smiles and warns that if nothing changes, Clint will lose his job in the next election. After they leave, Clint notices the presence of the black officers and whispers something to the bartender. Understanding the message, the officers decide to leave the place and return to base. Upon arriving, the guard stops them at the entrance and asks for identification. He informs them that the base is closed and that no one can enter or leave without special permission. He is about to call the on-duty officer when Dick Halloran calmly asks him to say that who is there is Dick Halloran. The guard obeys, and as soon as the name is mentioned, authorization is granted immediately. The next day, 3 young natives watch from a distance as a group of military personnel excavates on their land. Among them is Dick Halloran, with a haggard face and vacant eyes, still recovering from a hangover. This is already the 4th archaeological excavation site in just 4 months, and his commander is starting to lose patience. The officer, clearly irritated, says he is tired of trudging through the forests just to unearth trash. He criticizes him, saying that he can impress some with his supposed talents. But in reality, he sees only what the government allows, without receiving anything significant in return. He sarcastically asks if he really appreciates those privileges being touted. Halloran, calm, avoids confrontation and responds that they are close to finding what they are looking for. In the school cafeteria, Marge waves for Lily to join her and her friends, but Lily ignores her and sits alone. After a while, Ronnie, nervous, approaches her and says the thing came back. Lily looks at her worried. While Marge's friends whisper, not understanding why Lily prefers Ronnie, even after Marge assured that she isn't crazy anymore. Uncomfortable, Marge tries to catch attention with laughter, but Patty, annoyed by the distraction, asks if Marge is wearing the same clothes as yesterday. Returning to the conversation, Lily asks if Ronnie is hurt. Ronnie, shaking, says no, but mentions that the monster said terrible things about her father. Lily tries to calm her, assuring her everyone knows her father wasn't guilty and that he told the truth to the police. Ronnie, anxious, wants to know if Lily said a monster came out of the screen. Lily denies it, explaining she doesn't know what happened that night, only that she didn't see Ronnie's father, Ronnie. Desperate, fears the police will fabricate their version of the facts. Lily warns her that mentioning the monster will lead them to believe Ronnie is crazy, and they will lock her up again. Her voice chokes as she recalls that she can't endure going back to the asylum and can't go through that again. But Ronnie isn't convinced. She watches her, stating they are arguing about her father's life, who can't remain silent. Lily repeats that she has done all she could. She said he wasn't there, and that's it. Frustrated, Ronnie stands up and screams that they both know this is a lie. The entire cafeteria goes silent. All eyes turn to them. The teacher, alarmed, intervenes and orders Ronnie to go to detention. In the hallway, Will eats lunch alone. Rich tells him he can't sit there, as it is reserved. Although later he jokingly mentions that he can't reserve the whole floor, and we see that, like Will, he also eats alone. Then he asks about the book he is reading before sighing at the sight of Patty's girls passing by, especially Marge. When another boy launches a smoke bomb, Will bumps into a teacher who is not very pleased to be knocked down. He ends up being punished along with Ronnie. They get to know each other, and he tells her he was punished unfairly and asks if she was too. She admits that, in her case, she is really guilty. Ronnie is surprised to see him reading voluntarily. He explains that science seems interesting and tries to speak positively about the smoke bomb, pointing out that some chemicals in it are also found on other planets. She says that's strange, and he replies that a stranger recognizes another stranger. Outside, Lily faces a fate worse than punishment. The police take her to the station. Lily sits in front of Officer Clint, her hands trembling and her gaze lost. She assures him she didn't see Hank that night, but the police chief knows how to manipulate her. He explores her weaknesses, the trauma she carries from what happened with her father, and her history in the psychiatric hospital. In a cold tone, he suggests he can send her back to Juniper Hill for a few days for her own protection. The fear paralyzes her. Clint asks, appearing calm, if she is completely certain that Hank wasn't there. Lily hesitates, admitting she isn't, and that brief silence is enough to condemn him. Shortly after, Hank is arrested and taken away in handcuffs under the powerless gaze of Ronnie and his grandmother, both devastated. The girl can barely hold back tears as she watches the police car driving away. Moments later, Ronnie storms into Lily's house, demanding to know what she did. Lily tries to explain, saying she didn't tell anything, that Officer Clint tricked her and threatened her, and that she didn't know how to react. Ronnie looks at her with a mixture of anger and desperation before Lily's mother slams the door. The next morning, at the military base, Hanlon visits Masters in his cell. Hanlon places a gun next to a magazine. Then, he watches him and says it's the same model that one of his attackers pointed at her that night. He explains it's a standard weapon in Eastern Bloc countries, across the Berlin Wall, rarely seen where they are. It's difficult to handle, and even more complicated to load firmly. He demands to know how he managed to get such a rare weapon, and above all, how he could manipulate it with such skill. Hanlon says the attacker loaded it with impressive speed, a skill that many Korean officers don't have. She claims she knows he wasn't there that night, checked his papers, and saw that he barely manages to assemble an M16, much less a Soviet weapon. Hanlon changes tactics, provokes him with comments to make him lose control. Masters, enraged, falls into the trap. He grabs the gun, tries to load it, but can't. Hanlon confirms his theory. Masters was not one of the assailants that night. Hanlon visits General Shaw and tells him that Masters is innocent. He explains that although he is a stupid racist, he didn't commit the crime. He adds he will present a report to request a formal investigation. Before Hanlon leaves, Shaw asks him to sit. The general admits he needed to verify if the rumors about his brain injury were true, and that he hasn't disappointed him, presenting a damaged amygdala, something he hasn't heard in 50 years of service. He comments that he spent too long in combat not to recognize a courageous man when he sees one, and expresses that Hanlon is a rarity, an exceptional creature, a man without fear. He has been looking for someone like that for a long time. Finally, Shaw reveals it was all a test and he passed it. Hanlon, furious, demands to know who was the masked man who hit him with a pipe. Shaw admits this shouldn't have happened, but reminds him he promised anonymity to his men. Even so, he asks him to stay 10 more minutes to listen. Meanwhile, Lily goes to the supermarket alone, as her mother needed to cover an extra shift at work. At the end of an aisle, she hears a voice behind her, an indistinct whisper saying she should be locked up. A moment later, a voice over the intercom calls her name, and everyone present watches her. Lily quickens her pace, terrified, as the aisles seem to twist into a dead end. There, she sees the faces of her dead friends reflected on the cereal boxes. Inside a jar of pickles, the decomposing face of her father stares at her intently. When the jar breaks, an avalanche of containers falls around her. Lily loses her balance. The lights flicker, and the limbs of an undefined creature writhe until they fuse into a grotesque mass. Then, another thing grabs her by the neck. The monster approaches slowly. Lily closes her eyes, and when she opens them, everything is back to normal. Only the broken pickles jar remains on the floor, the same one she had thrown. Its explosion leads her mother to decide to institutionalize her again in Juniper Hill. Meanwhile, Shaw and Hanlon head to the secret area of the base. Shaw informs him that earlier that year, Cubans and Soviets held an agricultural summit in Cuba. Hanlon comments he heard about it on TV, but Shaw replies he only heard what the government allowed to be disclosed, that what was not revealed was the true aim of that meeting. In reality, the summit planned to position nuclear warheads capable of reaching the United States. From Cuba, the Soviets could strike cities within minutes. What he is about to show Hanlon could be the only hope to prevent such a catastrophe. The plan isn't to construct a new weapon, but to find one long buried somewhere in Derry. They don't know exactly what it is, but its very existence provokes profound fear. It could terrify a man so completely that it would destroy him entirely. They ignore its origin and operation, but what they know is that around it, there is a set of objects acting as beacons. If they can locate these objects, they can determine the exact location of the weapon, and at that moment, they will need Hanlon to secure it. Just then, a man enters accompanied by Dick Halloran and informs that they have made an important discovery. Shaw asks Hanlon to accompany them. It is already night, and the rain is falling heavily on the excavation. They have unearthed an old car from the 30s, and several human skeletons tumble out of it. With that, they are close to the truth. The scene cuts to a flashback in 1908, inside a circus. There we see a boy named Francis, who watches each attraction in the place with fascination. The circus manager, noticing his curiosity, approaches him and smiles. Mischievously, he warns that he is about to witness the most grotesque and terrifying show he could imagine. Intrigued, the boy decides to enter. The atmosphere inside the circus is strange and unsettling, filled with bizarre and disturbing presentations. There is a maze of mirrors that distort the faces of those who pass by. There is also a pair of twins connected by an umbilical cord and a pianist playing a dark melody that engulfs the entire strange place. Francis, with a mix of admiration and fear, moves even further into the venue. In one of the rooms, he distinguishes a figure in the shadows who whispers for him to come closer, assuring him not to be afraid. The boy hesitantly approaches with tentative steps and a racing heart. Then, the old man lights a match, and his face is revealed in the flickering light. A decrepit, thin, sickly man with a single eye whose presence provokes true terror. Suddenly, the other figures begin to laugh with a macabre laughter, causing Francis to flee in absolute panic. But as he exits, he bumps into his father. Seeing him pale and trembling, the father scolds him for being scared and tells him not to be a coward. To distract him, he offers him a small prize he won, a slingshot. Together, they leave the place. Later, as they drive down the road, the car breaks down. The father gives Francis some money and asks him to go buy a drink. The boy approaches a lemonade stand run by 3 Native American children dressed in their traditional garb. Noticing he does not have enough money, a girl notices the slingshot in his pocket and offers a trade. Francis agrees, handing over his toy in exchange for the drink. When the car works again and they continue their journey, the father asks about the slingshot. Francis does not respond. He just smiles, remembering the moment he gave it to the girl by the roadside. An instant bond forms between Francis and the girl who served him, a spontaneous complicity that makes them run together. Amid laughter and curiosity, they seem to enjoy a brief childhood freedom, until Francis approaches the forest. The girl, alarmed, shouts for him not to enter, but he, driven by curiosity and the bravery of his age, ignores her warnings and runs among the trees. As he advances, the atmosphere becomes darker, and the silence of the forest fills with strange sounds that keep him alert. Suddenly, a familiar figure emerges from the shadows. It is the same creepy old man from the circus. Francis, with his heart racing, shouts at him, asking what he wants. Turning around, he finds himself face to face with the old man, who watches him with a grotesque expression. Francis screams in terror and takes off running. The old man chases him with inhuman agility. His long legs allow him to easily catch up, and soon his body begins to contort and transform into a terrifying creature, moving on all fours at a frightening speed. Francis stumbles again and falls. The creature lunges towards him, and for a moment the boy thinks it's the end. However, at the last moment, the girl appears, and with determination, she shoots the slingshot directly into the monster's eye. The creature lets out a scream of pain and writhes. Without wasting time, the girl takes Francis's hand, and they both run among the trees as the being pursues them. Back in the present, at the Juniper Hill facilities, Lily's mother finally arrives to pick up her daughter. She talks to the doctor, who informs her that Lily's medication dosage has been increased. However, he warns that if she suffers another episode, they will have to consider a more restrictive treatment. Meanwhile, Lily talks with Ingrid, the head of the cleaning crew at the place. During her stay at Juniper Hill, Lily has developed a special affection for her, something that can be considered a small positive aspect of her experience there. Ingrid kindly and affectionately encourages her, saying that everything will be fine, that she is a smart girl and will know how to handle things on her own. Lily, a little unsure, confesses that she feels guilty because Ronnie's father is in jail because of her. She explains that, in fact, neither she nor Ronnie know each other that well, and that if she decides to tell the truth about what she saw that night at the cinema, they will surely send her back to Juniper Hill. Noticing Ingrid listens with genuine empathy, Lily asks what she would do in her place. Ingrid calmly responds that her father used to say that life is about the journey, but what really matters is who you take that journey with. She assures her that if Ronnie is so important to her, she will find a way to do the right thing, one way or another. Before saying goodbye, Ingrid tells her she believes in what she saw, and with a smile, returns her lucky bracelet. Meanwhile, at the police station, Chief Clint Bowers approaches the cell where Hank is detained. He offers him a cigarette and, in a deliberately calm tone, tells him that from his experience, he can easily identify liars. Then he asks where he was on the night of the crime. Hank repeats that he has already said he was at home, but Clint confronts him, pointing out that there is a witness placing him near the cinema that night. Hank, visibly upset, denies the accusation. However, Clint takes advantage of an earlier detail. Before reaching this point, Hank had mentioned his favorite brand of cigarettes. Then the chief pulls out a pack of that exact brand and tells him, with cold precision, that it was found at the crime scene. Hank desperately insists on his innocence, claiming he hurt no one and was not near the cinema. Clint walks away without responding, while Hank screams from the cell that it wasn't him. Meanwhile, at school, Ronnie walks down the hallway under the gaze of everyone who despises her. Students watch her curiously. Some laugh, and others take the opportunity to leave cruel messages on her locker, alluding to her father's situation. Amidst the laughter and general murmurs, the only one who seems to think differently is Will, who tells his new friend Rich he doesn't believe Ronnie was raised by a murderer. Ronnie, trying to stay calm, goes to the bathroom to clean the red stains left on her hand after erasing the insults written on her locker. At that moment, Lily arrives offering something that could help her clean better. However, Ronnie coldly rejects her, saying the only thing she wants is to hit her for what she did to her father. With a trembling but firm voice, Lily responds that she is determined to reveal the truth, no matter the consequences. She explains that she will do everything in her power to make amends for the damage she caused. She also tells Ronnie what happened at the supermarket. She claims she saw her father, and after that, they sent her to Juniper Hill. Now everyone thinks she is crazier than before, and even if she tells the truth, no one will believe her unless she can provide evidence. Ronnie, incredulous, asks where she plans to get that evidence. Then Lily shows her camera. Ronnie looks at her skeptically and asks if she really thinks it will pose for a picture. Even so, Lily insists they need to try. It's the only way to prove she isn't crazy and to show that Hank is not a murderer. Ronnie, still doubtful, tells her that assuming they manage to photograph the creature, if they send those images to be developed, nobody will deliver them. Distrust lingers between them. But in Lily's eyes, there is a determination that begins to slowly disturb Ronnie. In General Shaw's office, Colonel Fuller informs that they completely dismantled the car but found nothing relevant, only bloodstains and bullet holes. They also checked the area around the excavation without obtaining results. The general, visibly frustrated, comments that they are looking for something buried in Derry 300 years before the car was invented, and yet that vehicle emitted a signal that allowed Halloran to find it. Colonel Fuller reminds him that all of this is part of the 1935 cycle related to the Bradley Gang massacre, aspiring to emulate Dillinger, which unleashed the wrath of the town and were gunned down. Some witness accounts even mentioned the entity taking on one of its forms during those events. General Shaw listens attentively and reminds him that they still haven't located the target despite all the excavations done, and that time is running out since the psychic ability has already been proven. He orders that they place Halloran as close to the target as possible, even directly above it if necessary, using air support. Then Shaw opens a drawer and shows Fuller an ancient object, a relic from his own past. He explains that this artifact will help track their target more accurately because that object was marked a long time ago. Then we see Halloran talking with his colleagues when Colonel Fuller calls him. It's time to fulfill his mission. Fuller leads him to where Russo and Hanlon are and gives them clear instructions. They must consider Halloran their human compass. He orders them to follow him without questioning wherever he tells them. Moments later, the three are aboard an aircraft flying over the forests of Derry. Halloran holds in his hands a small object from General Shaw's past, carefully stored in a box. Russo's curiosity overcomes his discretion, and he asks what it contains, insisting that it does not look like a cigar box. Halloran, with an enigmatic expression, replies that they wouldn't understand. Finally, he opens the box and inside reveals a slingshot, the same one we saw in the initial flashback. At this moment, we understand that the boy named Francis is, in fact, General Shaw in childhood. Halloran touches the slingshot with respect, as if he feels something invisible, and then points towards the horizon. They must head east. We return again to 1908, soon after Francis and the girl escaped the forest, fleeing from the creature. Exhausted, they stop. Francis, still trembling, asks why they stopped, why they are not running anymore. The girl replies that they are already safe because the creature will not dare to leave the forest. Francis insists, wanting to know what that was, but she admits she doesn't know. Intrigued, the boy then asks why they don't cross the boundary of the forest. The girl watches him in silence and, with a solemn look, asks if he can keep a secret. At that moment, we return to the present, where Rose appears, and we discover that the girl from the past was her Rose, is attending a community meeting about the excavation the government is conducting on her people's ceremonial grounds. During the meeting, a young man, the one we saw in the previous episode, approaches her, warning that the car they pulled out belongs to the Bradley gang. Concerned, he tells her that they must act immediately before the excavators get even closer. However, Rose firmly replies that they must not intervene and expressly asks that neither he nor his friends get involved in this matter. Then, Rose stands up and addresses the gathered community. In a calm but determined tone, she suggests they reflect on the possible actions they can take regarding the excavation. The young man, frustrated, whispers that this will do nothing. Rose, unshaken, responds that she is not trying to stop them, at least not yet. Not until she finds out what they are really searching for down below. In the airplane, Russo notices that Halloran seems lost in a trance. He asks if everything is okay, but Halloran doesn't respond. His breathing quickens, and his body begins to shake as if he is having a seizure. Suddenly, he abruptly rises, although his mind is no longer there. He is in the sewers, in a deep, dark, damp hideout where Pennywise's circus cart rests. The lid of the hatch opens slowly, revealing inside a pair of golden eyes that watch him with malice. He asks who it is, and upon meeting the creature's gaze, a series of violent visions consume him. First, a party, then soldiers falling on a battlefield. And amidst the chaos, the silhouette of a woman in the distance. Halloran tries to resist, but the images overlap one after another until everything around him begins to crumble. Objects fall, and when he looks up, he sees a floating body. It is his grandmother warning him that he must flee because it is already coming for him. Desperate, Halloran opens the sewer lid to escape, but in reality, he is opening the lid of the airplane, unaware of what he is about to do. He remains trapped in his trance until Hanlon manages to grab him in time and pulls him back inside. Fortunately, Halloran regains consciousness. Later, Halloran is in the infirmary of the base recovering from the incident. General Shaw approaches him with a controlled expression. Halloran, still shaken, tells him he saw something, or more precisely, the creature saw him. Shaw, impassive, listens in silence. Impressed by Halloran's courage and psychic connection, the general tells him he could make his stay more comfortable, offering whatever he needed. Halloran only asks for a place to rest for himself and his companions, a calm location where they can relax. However, before leaving, he finds the courage to warn him. He states that this creature should not have knowledge about them, and warns that if they do not leave the entity in peace and continue the search to know it, something terrible will happen. Shaw watches him without saying anything. Finally, he turns away and steps back, making it clear that he has no intention of stopping the operation, regardless of the risk or the evil they are awakening. Will and Rich are in a small diner being served by Lily's mother, who works there. Will, excited, tells his new friend about space travel and jokes, laughing that the first human to reach space did so with his pants wet. Both enjoy the conversation, and it's clear they are building a genuine friendship. In the midst of the conversation, Rich admits that Marge seems like the prettiest girl in school. The moment of camaraderie is broken when Ronnie and Lily appear in front of the place. From the window, Ronnie signals for Will to come out. Outside, Ronnie asks if he knows how to develop photographs, reminding him that during the punishment, he showed talent for chemistry. Will, a little confused, wants to know why they need his help, but Ronnie says he wouldn't believe them, even if they explained. Later, Will and Rich walk down the street while discussing the mysterious plan. Rich asks if he really believes what Ronnie says. She saw Will responds that he doesn't know if it's true, but he is convinced she believes it. Rich laughs and says the issue is that Will is in love with Ronnie. He quickly denies it, though his expression betrays him. Meanwhile, in Rose's antique shop, someone arrives and she freezes upon recognizing him. It's General Francis Shaw, whom she hasn't seen in 50 years. The surprise leaves her speechless. Shaw smiles and tells her it's strange because before returning to town, he didn't remember anything, not even her name. Rose calmly waves and replies that this often happens. She explains that it doesn't matter how long someone lives in Derry. The farther they go, the more everything fades in memory, as if the town slowly erases its marks from the minds of those who leave. Some would say this is for the better. She adds Shaw, however, comments that the place has its own charms. She asks what he really remembers. Shaw says very little. Fragments of his childhood, his father, life on the base, and above all, her Rose smiles incredulously and reminds him that they barely shared a summer when they were 12. So she doubts he really remembers her. Shaw replies that he indeed didn't remember until a week ago and shows her a paper. Her name appeared in a cease and desist letter related to the government's excavation sites. Intrigued, Rose asks him what he is really doing there. Shaw assures her that they are checking where to place pipes to bring water from the Candusk gig. Although we know he isn't telling the truth, Rose mentions the growing concern of her community. The excavations may disturb sacred remains and damage unmarked cemeteries. She insists she will not allow that to happen. Shaw tries to calm her and suggests they work together, implying that she could show them which areas to avoid. He tells her she can trust him, but Rose, though polite, doesn't believe a word. Finally, she responds that she will speak to the city council. We see a flashback in which Rose and Francis continue spending time together. On a day out, Rose notices he seems sad and asks what is wrong. Francis, with a distant look, confesses that his father received a relocation order and they will leave the next morning. Rose, upset, takes the slingshot and returns it to him, telling him it's better that he keeps it so he can remember her. Francis smiles sadly and asks her to promise she will never forget him, nor the summer they shared. Rose looks down and replies honestly that the place has something special, something that makes people forget, even when they don't want to. Back in the present, Ronnie, Lily, Rich, and William meet at the top of the old tower. The former hideout of Teddy, Phil, and Maddie. Rich looks around, marveling at the incredible appearance of the place, and asks Lily how she knows it exists. She explains that it used to be her friend's hideout. Ronnie, not wasting time, raises the question they all have. How will they get the photograph if it means waiting for the creature to attack again? Lily responds they need to provoke it somehow. Will, curious, asks in what forms it has appeared before. Lily confesses that it attacked her like Maddie, and like her own father, While it appeared to Ronnie as her mother, Ronnie firmly clarifies that they weren't really them, but something taking their forms to scare them. The real question, she adds, is what that thing really is. After a few seconds of silence, Rich says it could be an entity, an evil spirit. Lily looks at him strangely and asks how he knows that. He explains that he isn't sure, but his uncle was a babalawo in Cuba. He told him that when someone betrayed or hurt him, he would invoke an entity and send it after those people. The darkest spirits would take on the form of the victim's deceased ancestors to instill true terror. Finally, Ronnie breaks the moment and cautiously asks if his uncle never told him how he performed the ritual. Meanwhile, at Hanlon's house, Halloran is invited to a family dinner. At the table, Charlotte shares some memories of her past as a history teacher and also mentions that she is an activist, which, according to her, sometimes worries Hanlon as he fears her activism could create a controversial image before his colleagues. Halloran perfectly understands this concern. He knows that it is already hard to be a black man in service, and if he has ambition, his personal life needs to be as spotless as his uniform. During the conversation, Halloran asks about Will, but Hanlon tells him he will see him later since the boy is at a friend's house. Meanwhile, we see Ronnie, Lily, Rich, and Will at the cemetery, lighting candles. Rich tests the camera and exclaims that it's fantastic while looking at his friend Will, who seems a little uncomfortable. Lily, in a determined tone, reminds Rich that they have already followed all the steps he mentioned. Finally, the four sit in a circle, ready to begin the ritual. On the porch of the house, Hanlon and Halloran continue their conversation. Hanlon tells him he never mentioned he had a son. Halloran smiles slightly and replies that maybe he heard it from someone at the base, but Hanlon knows very well that that isn't true. Then he changes tone and asks what exactly happened on the plane. He saw Halloran close his eyes as if searching for something and wants to know what it was. Halloran hesitates for a moment before responding. Finally, he explains that his grandmother used to say, "It's about seeing things without seeing them." Hanlon nods with curiosity and comments that he has never met anyone with that kind of ability. He has heard of such people, but has never met one in person. Then he confesses something more. When Halloran asked about his son, he felt a sort of pressure at the nape of his neck, something hard to describe, a strange feeling he only experienced once before, on the night he was attacked. He watches him and says he knows Halloran was there. He firmly asks him not to enter his mind. Halloran nods, not feeling offended. He assures him he understands, and adds that during that same attack, he was watching him closely too. He says he noticed something strange. The part of Hanlon's brain that should feel fear seems to be absent. Then, with a brief smile, he admits that he is not the kind of man he would want to confront. While recognizing that Hanlon saved his life on the plane, he wouldn't mind having him by his side in the trenches. At that moment, Charlotte appears on the porch and interrupts them, offering dessert. Back at the cemetery, the children discover that Rich is not any kind of expert in spiritual rituals. He has been lying to them from the start. When they find out, the girls become furious and decide to leave immediately, although Will intervenes, trying to calm things down. He explains that Rich just wanted to help, that his intentions were good. Then he admits that, in fact, he also doesn't believe in ghosts. Will's words hurt Ronnie, who feels disappointed to realize her friend still doesn't believe her hurt. She leaves without saying anything more. Lily, for her part, grabs her camera and also walks away. Will extinguishes the candles on the makeshift altar and, along with Rich, runs to follow them. As the girls pedal through the fog, they begin to notice the surroundings distorting. Tombstones shatter and the ground opens into deep fissures. Then, through the mist, the ghosts of Teddy, Phil, and Susie appear, advancing towards them with distorted faces. Lily tries to take a picture, but the camera gets caught on a branch and becomes stuck. Ronnie manages to press the shutter once before the device falls from her hands. Rich rushes to grab it, but awkwardly drops it again. Then, he asks Will to catch it. At that exact moment, something moves inside a nearby crypt. With his heart racing, he approaches to see what it is. A hand emerges from the shadows. Instinctively, Will lifts the camera and presses the shutter, capturing the moment. Meanwhile, Ronnie, Lily, and Rich desperately await their friend until they see him approach. When they finally reunite, Will, still trembling, tells Ronnie she was right, that he should have believed her from the start. The four embrace, exhausted, and together they manage to leave the cemetery. Later, the children enter the school to reveal the photographs. Will gives precise instructions about the process. In the first photo, Teddy's ghost is clearly visible. In the next, Susie's. But in the last one, the one Will took in the crypt, something different appears. We finish by seeing a horrifying figure with golden eyes, resembling a smiling and scary clown.